All right, guys, in today's module, we're going to talk a little bit about some amazing tips that you guys can use when you're pitching to an editor and some things that you shouldn't be doing. And so let's get started. My name is Rafi Chowdhury. I'm the founder of Influencer Spotlight, and we work with creative entrepreneurs, coaches, speakers, consultants, and we get their voices heard on major publications. And we also help them become a contributor and a writer for some of these major publications. So without further ado, let's begin. Drinking some milk. All right. So editors are busy people, and if you haven't figured that out by now, you need to know that they are busy people. They've got millions of things going on. And so what you need to do if you want your pitch to stand out from everybody else's out there is that you need to make sure that you're being creative and you're being unique. Okay, so today I'm going to share with you guys some secrets that I've kind of picked up along the way that have worked really well to make an editor impressed. All right, number one, they love unique material. They don't want generic, boring stuff. They want you to be unique. Number two, connecting with them isn't really that hard, but getting to let you write for them is really hard. So when you connect with them, just do a really good job of networking, connecting on social media, etc. But when you do to go to give a pitch, make sure that you follow all the guidelines and give a killer pitch, because just because they're talking to you and connecting with you and tweeting back at you doesn't necessarily mean they're going to publish you. Number three, don't make grammatical mistakes. I used to work in the agency world back in the day, and you'd be surprised. I've seen, companies, agencies make ginormous blunders and nothing happens. Companies overlook it, but they make the simplest of spelling mistakes that get fired. And this is a very common thing, and it can happen. And this is very true when you're pitching. Make sure that grammatically you're correct. You don't want your editor to be correcting your grammar and spelling mistakes and things like that. Your pitch should make them curious. Okay, it should make them want to figure out, like, what is this really about? What's going on here? So if you're not being creative and unique and making them making your story seem curious by building, a lot of suspense in your story and kind of not really, telling the full details until near the end of your pitch, that's how you're going to make your story. That's how you're going to make them seem curious about what you have to say. All right, tip number 5, you should avoid being pushy. All right, being pushy and kind of trying to get them to constantly just kind of do what you want them to do, again, is not a good way to connect with editors. You should follow up and you should be consistent, but don't just be naggy and constantly keep emailing and messaging them if they haven't published your work or if they haven't gotten a chance to look at your pitch yet. So give a brief intro about the how and the why. They want to let them know, like, why why this story is important, why this matters to their audience. You have to let them know that, and then also let them know that how this will be important, or that how you did something, or how you did this, and how this made you feel, or how this experience that you've, this thing that you experience, how it has affected your life, how does it affect the audience's life. So within your pitch, let them know these things. So be specific. So if you're saying, like, I've made lots of money, don't say lots of money. Be very specific. State how much money did you make. If you say that, yeah, I've seen so many cases, instances of this, blah, blah, blah. Well, state those instances. Be actually concrete and give concrete examples of things and use specific numbers, use specific words to describe things. Don't be generic and vague, but try to be as specific as you possibly can, especially when you're giving advice in your articles. Be very actionable, be very specific. And most importantly, just like the other top tips I shared earlier, tell them something new. They get tons of pitches, where it's just like the same stuff, different day, same story, different guy. Just be unique. Just try to stand out from everybody else. And the best way to stand out from everybody else is ask yourself, if you read this story, would you be interested? If you had nothing to do with this topic at all, really, for the most part. If you can still find interest in it, then yeah, you've done a good job of telling something interesting and new. So there are some publications that are very easy to write for and that you should consider writing for. I've listed some of them here. One of them is Startup Grind. I contribute there. You can contribute to marketing and growth hacking. They have a blog. It's amazing. You can write up for Hacker Noon. They do a ton of amazing content. You can reach out to the Writing Cooperative. Excuse me. You can, if you're into like UX and things like that, and front end design, you can reach out to the Prototyping blog. You can reach out to a blog called 100 Naked Words. You can go to Entrepreneur's Handbook and pitch them. And there is a blog called Becoming Human. You can definitely pitch there as well. These are just some very easy to get into publications that have a ton of following and very easy to write for. So pitch these ones. So how do you get an editor's attention, and especially at these particular blogs? So obviously you want to connect with them on their blogs and on their columns. You want to reach out to them on LinkedIn, send them a message. You can find them in Facebook groups, including my own group. There's tons of editors and columnists in that group, so connect with them there. You can find them on Twitter. You can find them obviously on other big publications where they write. They may have their own columns as well. You can obviously write blogs and articles related to their niche, and it'll eventually get to them. And if it doesn't, you need to reach out to them and show them that you're writing on something that they might be interested in. Avoid being pushy, like we talked about, and focus with consistency. That's the biggest thing, is that most people try something and they quit it because it doesn't work the first time. The thing with blogging and pitching and becoming a contributor is you have to keep going at it, even if you don't get in the first time, the second time, the third time. You've got to keep going, and eventually you will make it happen. So how can you improve your chances of getting accepted into a publication? Well, it's really hard, but it can be done. And sometimes it's very, very hard, and it takes a long, long time, but it can eventually be done for the most part. Come up with a good story. Most publications are looking for good, creative, interesting stories. Read about the publication that you're pitching to and just see what does this publication talk about? What are their guidelines? Who writes it? What kind of background do they have? What kind of writing style do they accept? What sections do they have? What topics? What's the word count? Know and understand what you're pitching before you pitch. Like I said so many times, don't be generic. You cannot be generic if you're going to write. Be really creative. Keep it simple and straight and to the point. You want to be creative, but you also don't want to be, off track and talking about so many unrelated things. Be straightforward and get to your point and have a very specific topic that you're talking about. Avoid advertising your brand. We talked about this before. Most of the publications don't really like you talking about yourself all the time in a promotional way, but they do like it when you talk about how you did something and how it affected and benefited you. So instead of saying, buy my product, sell my product, this is what we do, so you should buy it. And then instead you can say, hey, this is what we did, this is what happened, and this is how it impacted our industry, our business, and our market, and my life, etc. That they do enjoy. Tell them something new to attract your idea. So again, come up with something new and interesting, something attractive, a topic that hasn't been talked about, maybe taking two different niches and combining them together and crafting some sort of article. Like, for example, when I started writing about like how playing chess helped me in the business world and in marketing. So I took some two completely unrelated things, chess and business, and I brought them together, and I found a niche and an interesting idea that I can talk about that nobody else out there is talking about. So it was kind of unique and interesting. And obviously you want to be specific. So what's next? Understanding your editor's choice by following these simple guidelines that I've kind of noted below. Study the publication. You want to know what's in it. What do they talk about? Read the comments from the audiences. Look to see what the comments actually are. What about that article do people find interesting? What makes them want to read it? If you just read the comments, you'll get a pretty good understanding of what points in this article were resonated the most with that audience. And if you can hit on those similar points, you're gonna do well with your pitch as well. And obviously note how they write. Look at other columns and other publishers on that platform and see what's the writing structure like. See their writing guidelines. See if you can do a feature article or a blog. So sometimes you can do like a feature on a particular persona or a particular business or a particular event or an idea. So look to see if there is something going on right now in your environment or in your industry or in your life, or some important person that you kind of look up to or have come across that you can, really talk about in that article. Read about editorial guidelines. The most important thing is you want to follow those things to the dot. Like you don't want to, do anything else that doesn't fit those guidelines. Just be spot on with meeting their guidelines. That's the most important thing they look for. And obviously, don't publish duplicate content. Duplicate content doesn't necessarily mean something like that it's just anything that's been published anywhere on the web at all is considered duplicate. So even if you wrote it and you publish it elsewhere, it's typically going to be considered duplicate. Majority of publications don't accept it. There are obviously some out there that don't really care much, as long as you link back to the original article, as long as you say something about it. But most of the time they want unique, fresh content. Double check your pitch. So don't be generic. Don't use generic stuff. Write something new. Create your own trend. If you don't think that there's something interesting you talk about, come up with something on your own, Just make your own hashtag or whatever. Make your own trend. Pitch in a way that can easily get them interested right away. So you want to capture their attention, boom, on the spot with that title, with that headline, with that first paragraph. So think of how you can make the first paragraph super, super unique. For example, I wrote a blog post a while back that was about virtual assistants and how virtual assistants can be used to automate a lot of things on the internet. And the title of my post was, "If I died tomorrow, no one would even know the power of virtual assistants." That's a powerful pitch. So you want to think of something like that. It makes people curious. It makes them want to figure out, like, what are you talking about? What's this about? Your pitch needs to be concise. You can't be too long and too lengthy with it. Just get to the point. Like I said, editors are busy people. They don't want to read through tons and tons of email. So your email needs to be short and to the point, maybe like 5 sentences at most. And your pitch itself needs to be very short and to the point. So make it 500 to 800 words. Try not to go overboard with it. Your pitch typically should not be more than that, honestly. Even an 800-word pitch is typically almost a full-fledged article. And number 7 is tell them an idea that worked for you. So something that you've already done and you've achieved is best. It's best that you write about things that you've already done or experienced instead of writing things that you've never done before. So here are some things that you shouldn't do. Don't pitch your story without first reading the publication. We talked about that in the last few slides. Don't just sit there if you don't get a reply. And that's the thing, like, not everybody checks every platform. So if you don't hear back, reach out to them again. Message them on social media if they don't respond to your email. And if they don't respond to your message on Facebook, email them. And reach out to them, call them. If there's a phone number, pick up the phone and call them. Do whatever it takes to get the people's attention that you need. And it's like not it's to your advantage if they respond to you. So do whatever it takes to make sure that you make it happen. And I keep looking that way because my pigeons are over there fighting, so it's getting kind of interesting. Don't just sit. Okay. Don't just sit there if you don't get any reply. Don't give away too much information. If it's a red hot story, make them curious and make them find out more by coming to you and asking you for it. Don't write long paragraphs. Obviously, just try to keep it short and to the point, simple sentences. Don't give used material. Make it fresh. Don't just copy and paste it, but change and edit things specifically for that publication, for that particular editor. Don't send anything without reading it first. If you've got an assistant or a writer that's writing on your behalf, make sure that you overlook and read the entire thing before you send it in. And don't prolong the length. Don't make it too lengthy. Just keep it to the point and short and sweet. So you need to really enjoy writing if you want to become a contributor and someone who wants to get media attention and publications and things like that. So you want to pitch professionally. Don't be slack. Don't slack off on it. Don't be just be maintain business structure and just try to be professional. and use good judgment in when, like don't email, don't text an editor in the middle of the night, and don't call in the middle of the night. Things like that you just want to keep in mind. You have to obviously enjoy writing. If you don't like writing and that's not your thing, then this is not, it shouldn't be your thing, honestly. You want to make sure that your pitch and whatever you're trying to write about is firsthand account, something that you've experienced, something that you personally are qualified to write about. Your pitch should not should be in simple English. Don't use big words. Don't write in Spanish. Don't write in Mandarin. Unless you're pitching to like QQ or something. Just make it simple. Make it simple English, easy to understand, and it'll trust me. It'll get their attention. This one is funny. Don't be robotic in your story. Don't be a robot. This is like robotic dances and things like that. This is not the time. You want to be casual, natural, and be yourself in your stories. Yes, follow the guidelines of publication, but don't try to sound like you're just some sort of the person that you're not. Just write in your own natural language, is what I would say. All those things that you learn in school about, like, just throw all that out of the way. Just think about how can you resonate and make your audience like your story. That's all they care about, and fit that publications guidelines, obviously. Use commas, punctuations. We talked about grammar a little bit in the past few slides. Talk in a flow, and what that means is that, like, how to explain? Flow is basically a state where you're just kind of like in this zone almost, okay, and you're just this very focused in your work, and you're just kind of drowning out so many other things, distractions are going around you. So when you write, you should have a flow to your writing as well, meaning your stuff should come naturally and kind of come together instead of just being random thoughts here and there. Kind of, there shouldn't be any disjunct between all of your different ideas in your article. It should have a very defined beginning, a middle, some ideas. So ideally, a structure basically is you give an overview of what you're going to talk about and why this is important. You're going to have some bullet points, actual actionables of what to do, some examples underneath each one, and then kind of like a summary and a wrap up that kind of combines everything together and says, well, here are the main things that you should have learned from this article. And so pause when you tell something exciting. So, it's kind of hard to do that in writing. A lot of times it's easier to do it in speaking, but in writing, if you have something exciting, take a pause and kind of maybe repeat that sentence again or something like that. Give some emphasis to it. Maybe put in italics. There's different ways to do that. So here are some things that I do in my columns that you can follow as well, that I feel like are pretty generic enough to where you can apply these to many places where you write. So try to have one particular focus and one idea per post. Don't try to focus and cover too many things in one article. Just try to keep it on topic, and their topic should be one thing. Write in headlines. So when you write a post, make sure that you have tons of headlines, because most people don't really just read from first to last. They kind of skim things. So if you put headlines, you're gonna have be able to draw their attention to the main points that you want them to focus on. Don't use a hedge. That means like so make sure that all your content is basically aligned properly, and it's just not like there's not all sort of indents and things like that are going on. So try to keep everything properly structured. Simple language is always going to be better than complex and hard to understand languages. Don't imitate. So don't try to be someone that you're not. Don't try to write like somebody else. Just try to write like yourself. And the sixth point is the same thing. Be yourself. Know when to stop. Don't just keep writing forever and ever and ever. I don't care what kind of flow state you might be in. There's obviously a word limit and a guide. There's limits to how long your word count can be, and majority of publications typically accept articles between 800 to about 1200 words. So try to keep it within that length. But again, like I said, it depends on each publication that you're pitching to. So obviously you want to impress your editor, and how do you do that? You want to look for submission detail. You want to get in touch after you know what they want. Make a working relationship. Send what they need to or not. Cover a story that is impactful. Influence your editor with stats. Don't just pitch, but pitch with style. So you want to make sure that you impress your editors, and that means that making sure that you do things that are creative, that are interesting, that's going to get their attention. And so obviously some of the first things that you want to do is look for their submission details. So go to the page where they have the guidelines for how to submit an article, where to submit it to, who to submit it to, and what to submit. So do that. Get in touch after you know what they want. So reach out to them and say, hey, my name is, John Smith, and I want to write an article on blah, blah, blah. Would that be something that you guys would want to, consider? And they may not reply. They may not. If it's a big publication, you may never hear back from them. But if they do reply, it might be something like, yes, our editorial guidelines are right here. Please go review them. And that's where we have, shared what we want you guys to write on. And that's likely. In that case, you can probably say, hey, my name is Rafi, and I'm over here on your submission guidelines page, and get link to that page, and say, I was wondering after reading this if I could write on this particular topic. Would that be something you guys would be interested in? It just shows that you are very serious, and you're reaching out to them, and you're also getting some feedback from them before you actually write your pitch. So it makes it a lot easier and a lot less work. You want to make a working relationship. So make sure that you keep lines of communication open, and that you respond appropriately if they do respond. Try to respond back quickly, and show them that you're actually interested in engaging with them. Number 4 is send what they need and not what you want. So pitch them things that they want to cover, that they want to hear, and not necessarily what you want to pitch. Try to come up with things that for sure that the publication is looking for. See it from their point of view. Number 5, cover a story that can impact. So again, you want to have a story that's actually noteworthy. If you haven't done something cool and creative, then you probably don't deserve to be mentioned. And if you aren't qualified to talk about certain things, then you probably shouldn't be talking about certain things. So make sure you're actually an expert authority and to have some experience with something before you start writing on that topic. So influence your editors with stats. Again, I talked about being very specific and using numbers and specific language to highlight certain things that you've done, certain things that have happened, and just try to use numbers whenever possible. And talk about your other accomplishments as well when you pitch, is how many followers you have, how many audience you have, how many different places you write, all that kind of stuff. Don't just pitch, but pitch with style. Make your, like I said, make sure that you are creative and you're colorful, and you come off as someone that's just has a very cool and attractive style, basically. If you're too inexperienced for editors, then you shouldn't be pitching them. So if you haven't done enough writing, and if you're not qualified to write for a publication, then don't write for that publication. Another thing is that if you don't bold certain text in your pitch, if you need, if certain things are important, then you need to use boldface and italics and things like that to really point out those things to an editor, or whichever publication that you're pitching, just to kind of draw attention to that part of the text, because it's something important. If you overdo your expressions, so don't use too many expressions that are kind of distracting. Use them whenever it makes sense naturally, here and there. But if you just keep doing the same thing over and over, like if you keep saying but then, or like you keep saying however, or anything like that, really too much, it just doesn't sound, that the article doesn't flow anymore as well. So don't use those too much. If you're bad at creating suspense, you are generally not going to be the best writer. Even if you're writing on boring topics, people like suspense. That's just how people like reading things. If you don't know what to write, before you pitch anything, and you should have some idea on what you want to write about or what the publication wants to hear. So know what you want to write about. And also, it's a mistake if you only um, do advertising without editorial guidelines. So you link out to some clients of yours, or you mention some companies that are compensating you and things like that. If you do come off promotional, then you're definitely headed in the wrong direction with your pitch. So what you want to do is share a presentable document. Okay, share something that they can actually understand and read. You want to make sure that you align your pages properly and their margins and things like that are set accordingly when you submit. You want to make sure that you use Calibri uh, for your font. It's generally a good font to use. You can also use the Arial if you want. You want to make sure that you add subtitles to everything so that it's easy to understand what you're talking about. You want to add and use infographics when appropriate to describe what you're saying in pictures. You want to make sure to cite your research. You want to also make sure to understand who is going to be reading this article. So have a really good understanding of the publication's audience. And you want to write for people, not for editors, not for yourself, not for, you want to write for people that are actually going to be reading it. So just think about what they want to hear. And if certain things happen, don't get offended. Like if your editor asks for revisions, it happens all the time and they're going to do it. And I get asked for revisions all the time too. So they're going to give you criticism and it's not always going to be very nice. So just take it and, make the changes as needed. If your editors ask for certain changes, obviously, if your editor does not respond within the same day, they're not going to respond within the same day probably. If your editor asks to be niche specific, so if they say nope, you're being too generic, you need to write on this particular topic, you should do that. And if your editor rejects your story, and that is very, very likely as well, they may just altogether just reject the entire thing and tell you to write something completely different, and that's also possible. Here are some general rules of thumb. Deliver on the exact deadlines. If you have to submit something by a certain time, just try to follow those deadlines and submit on time. You want to make sure that you research your audience and figure out who they are and what they want to hear. If you're writing for a business journal or of some type, they love strategies, they love specific how-tos and things like that. So try to come up with very specific and unique ways of doing something that a lot of people are searching for. If you're writing for a fashion publication, then they love gossip and things like that have been going around. So find some trendy things and trendy news and try to see if you can come up with ideas to write on those topics. Don't write on something that's completely irrelevant to the publication. They're probably not going to accept it, no matter how good the idea might be or how good the story is, the pitch is. If it's not related to what this publication talks about, it's not going to get accepted. Teach with your own example, like I talked about, writing about things that you personally experienced. It makes your pitch much, much stronger. And obviously you want to share niche-based insights, things that are happening in your niche, in your industry, in your market, in your environment, in your city, that are going to be interesting to that particular audience of that publication. So if they reject your article, come back with a new idea and come back with something that's actually going to be fitting their guidelines of what they're interested in. Intrigue your editor. Always conclude in style. Always come up with a conclusion that's going to be, interesting, and it's gonna make them wanna like remember your particular pitch. Balance your opening and ending. So again, you don't want to come off too, in one type of tone in the beginning and then completely different by the time you finish your pitch. Try to maintain the same type of tone. Don't use fake details. Don't try to fabricate your data or stats or stories. Just be authentic and be transparent and write things that have actually happened or you've actually experienced or something that's already actually worked. Tell the truth about your failure and how you succeeded. Even if you sucked at something, just tell it how it is. If you did really good at something, tell it how it is. And give visuals in your stories. Try to make people picture what you're writing, and that's a very powerful skill to have in writing, is being able to get people to imagine what something could be or what you're talking about. So you want to get creative. You want to use dots and things like that to create suspense in your writing. You want to write smart with a touch of sexy to it, and you figure out what that means. Make your story elegant and gorgeous. Don't be lame and boring and drab. Unfold your story with actionable items. So to-dos, how-tos, how to do this, how to do that. Always try to make it actionable and relevant. Go from good to better. So if you're already good at something, try to see if you can get better at it. There's always room for, betterment in almost any kind of, no matter, what kind of writer you are. Even me, like I've wrote for tons of publications, but I mean, I get rejected all the time. You have no idea. People see all the publications I write for. They're like, man, how'd you start writing for so many different places? What people don't see is how many places I pitched that turned me down. So, there's always room for improvement. And like I play a lot of basketball personally, and I was, when I listened to Stephen Curry, pretty much one of the best basketball players there is right now, when he talks about his shooting and stuff like that, he always says, like, unless you're out there shooting 100% in every game, there's always room to be better. And if he says that, if he's, one of the best basket shooters in the world has ever produced, and he's saying that about his shooting ability, imagine what that means for our crafts and what we do too. So if I'm a writer, I write, have written for Forbes and Entrepreneur and Huffington Post and these kind of places. But even me, I want to make sure that I keep getting better at it. Play with your words. Don't make them, just generic and lame. Just try to be creative and interesting when you write. And get your editors excited with competitive content. And what I mean by that is content that's actionable, content that's relevant, content that is people are searching for, that's high in demand but low in creation. So that's where you have the best type of things happening. So you want to impress me with your pitch. If I was an editor, I would want to hear from someone that was confident about their story and really, knew what they were talking about. I wouldn't want someone that was, you know, that got bothered if I just rejected their idea because it sucks and it doesn't really fit the criteria of the, guideline, the publication, and the audience. I would like to hear from someone that constantly pitches me with new ideas and new ways of presenting things. I would love to hear from someone that has read many of the other publications that are, other writers that are writing for my website. I would want to hear from someone that is constantly improving every day and try to get better at their craft and their story and their writing. Um, and obviously, if you're pitching, I can obviously help you. I run an entire course and an academy on this. That's in the pre-launch phase right now, but I've worked with several students already in doing this successfully. And so I would love to help you crafting your pitch as well if you already or haven't entered my program yet. And if you are in my program and you're watching this video, then congratulations. You're obviously getting the help, and hopefully, we're going to get you into some big name publications as a contributor. And you want to write something that's different, and if you can impress me, I can get your article on my websites and some of the columns that I write for as well. I'm going to get your article in my columns, but I'm going to at least get your ideas into my columns. And I'm going to obviously allow you to publish on my site, which gets quite a few visitors these days. That's pretty much it. All I have for you guys on this presentation. Thank you guys again. I'll catch you guys in the next video.